Well, always good to check in with Montrealers now living in Israel. And Mitch Sohmer is actually touched down in Montreal. Are you in your native Saint Laurent now? What part of town are you hanging out in?
I'm in native Saint Laurent, sure.
All right, so that's where you grew up. So, Mitch, you moved to Israel a number of years ago. Tell us the story. Where did you move to, and what were you doing? And we'll
Okay,
get into how things are going now after the terrorist attacks and how it impacted your life.
sure. So if we go far back, I grew up in a traditional Jewish home in Ville Saint Laurent. We attended Beth Ora. I was bar mitzvah there, and so on. I went to UTT, United Talmud Torah Saint Laurent. So I had a nice Jewish upbringing. I went to Hertz, didn't work out all the years. Went to Bialik, didn't quite work out all the years, and I finished high school in Laurent Hill on Code 2.
Okay.
And went to CJEP and then I stopped CJEP, and then I ended up working in a tattoo shop for a few years. And then kind of realized, this isn't going to take me so far. So I decided, after, you're a young guy, you work a lot, and what do you do with your money? You spend it on everything and nothing. And so, just to kind of commemorate the timing that I said, okay, I'm going to stop working, I'm going to go back to school to Concordia. To kind of commemorate this, I went on Birthright. So that was an easy decision. I didn't really expect anything going there. I had heard about Israel during my upbringing, and I was just blown away. I mean, the trip was amazing. 10 days with 40 other Jewish kids, 48 with the Israelis who joined. But then later on, family that I had never really met before took me in and showed me around. And really, just for another month going around Israel, I became, I don't know if I learned, I definitely didn't learn everything, but I was definitely much more curious. And I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the food. I fell in love with the nature of the country, and seeing the land, and really feeling connected to that place. And I came back, I would say, obviously pumped up and really ecstatic about Israel, but also very, very curious to understand much more what's really going on there, and how this place comes to exist, and how it exists, and just really get to know all the aspects about it, from the history to the people of today there. And I became involved in the Jewish community, doing several different jobs. And I would also, on the side, I would go to Israel every, I guess not every year. It was like about 4 years in between Birthright and my Aliyah. But I volunteered in Israel with JNF. I staffed a few Birthright trips as a North American staff person, and and I did a Hasbara trip, if you're familiar. It's a trip that's run by Aisha Torah
Right.
from Toronto and also New York.
Hmm.
Um, and eventually, I was just like, when I would come back to Montreal, I was homesick, if we can put it that way.
Yeah.
Montreal is always familiar, and it's always nostalgic, and I always have the restaurants and the bagels that I want to eat at.
Hmm.
But and my mom, she's saying it from the back over there. Um, but Israel became home, and I realized that on a trip that I had been on there in January of 2012. And that's it. A little bit later that year, in 2012, in July 5th of 2012, I made Aliyah and moved to Jerusalem. I had chosen Jerusalem because I had a few friends that were living there, and I felt that it was a comfortable place, and I liked the combination of, I guess, the mountains as well as a big city, and I felt that that was the place. I mean, if we speak about what I would have done today, it would have been Tel Aviv for sure, but
Right.
it's a different time, different space. And also, having been inspired by many people who I came in contact with through these journeys that I was a part of in Israel, I met really, really lovely tour guides or tour educators who were really, really inspiring. And they inspired me, in fact, to go and do the licensed tour guide course in Israel. So about a month or 2 months into being in Israel, I was accepted into the course, and I started the course in late December of 2012, and that kind of began that part of the journey in Israel. Continue? Should I keep going on
Yeah.
this?
So
Yeah.
so 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 we're going back now 13 years, or actually 11 years now.
11 years.
11 years, sorry. And that's my Wager High School math, by the way. And so you got into that business. You got into that became your profession in Israel.
Yes.
And
So
from there, where did we go?
So from there, actually, while living in the neighborhood of Nachlaot next to Machane Yehuda in Jerusalem, I actually met my current wife, my wife. I was living with her cousin, and we had met. And so while I was still studying, we started dating. And then I finally graduated from the tour guide course. We had moved. My wife was living in a small village outside of Jerusalem in Judea and Samaria called Anatot.
Meaning,
so that
for those who don't know, Judea and Samaria, meaning the West Bank.
that would be the West Bank, and for those who like the terminology, I guess a settlement, and a fairly secular one, just outside of North Jerusalem. And from there, you commute to Jerusalem every day, and we ended up living there together. She was living there already, and we ended up living there together for 5 years. At the same time, again, starting my business and growing my business, starting to work with all kinds of different tourists in Jerusalem. I had the opportunity to do a lot of day trips with really anyone around the spectrum. I guided Muslims, I guided Christians of all denominations and all sorts, Jewish groups, and I of course worked with Birthright as a tour educator, working with other youth groups, different missions from different cities that send their Jewish communities to Israel, and of course private tours and a lot of food tours, a lot of food tours.
Yeah.
That's what I was doing, and I guess just before COVID, we kind of felt already that Jerusalem is a big place. There's lots of traffic where we're living. We didn't really see a future for ourselves, and we started going around the whole country. And trying to figure out where we want to live. And that took us to the Golan Heights, that took us to the Galilee, that took us to the Dead Sea area, the Jordan Valley area, and eventually brought us to the Negev. And in the Negev, we found a beautiful community where we're living today. It's a Moshav called Be'er Milka, Be'er being like a well, or an oath if we're talking about Be'er Sheva, but Be'er Milka, which sits, I guess we can say roughly 55, 60 kilometers southwest of Beersheba, along the border with Egypt. So the Moshav itself sits about 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers from the Egyptian border in the area called Nitzana. And ever since we moved to that area, we've been working in different things, but I've still been working in tourism. Sometimes more desert tourism than other types, and always kind of trying to find ourselves and reinvent ourselves. But our community is quite versatile, and there's people who, for the most part, it's an agricultural community. So we have a lot of farmers. We have a lot of farmers, but we also have a lot of people who work in high tech and also different types of therapy, art therapy. Different types of massaging, different types of body movements like Pilates and yoga and all kinds of stuff like that, and a very, very close, tight-knit community. Today we're 50 families.
So take us now. Let's move to October 7th, the aftermath.
Sure.
You're 40 kilometers from Gaza. How did your life change after that?
So that morning, and I usually wake up before everyone in my house, which is about 6:37. So I woke up at around 7 that morning, and I know the house was shaking. We live in a trailer, so anything that goes on not too far from us, whether it be a sonic boom from a plane flying over or who knows what, it shakes. So I said, okay, we have a lot of army here, but it's Shabbat. And it's also Simchat Torah, so there's no way that they're training. There's no training going on, and there's no reason for these booms to happen. So I sat down with my coffee, and the booming is still going on, and I said, okay, I'll open the news. I didn't want to do it, but I opened the news just for fun and find out a lot of things that are not fun. Uh, we realize very quickly that the booming that we have around our house is from the indiscriminate rocket firings that are going on from Gaza. Um, and we realize that there is a massive, massive massacre going on, that there's chaos. I mean, for us, the heart starts pounding, and you kind of try to look around you, but where we live on a sand dune, and we just see the desert. We didn't really see anything.
Right.
It's kind of, you hear and you feel, and your heart's racing when you're reading the news, and it seems like there's chaos. And I guess for us, the kind of chaos that began was a little bit closer to 9:30.
Hmm.
At about 9:30, we understood that there was a rocket that fell about 800 meters from our village. We were able to see the smoke kind of rise out of where it fell. Uh, again, I don't know if things were specifically targeted, but there's an Air Force intelligence base about 15 kilometers from us, that was may have been a target, may not.
Hmm.
A little bit after that, there was another rocket fire, and that sent us all the families who live in the caravans or the trailers. We were told to go into the bomb shelter. Our bomb shelter is a kids playing center, which was built with the double use of a play center when the weather's not so nice,
Hmm.
and also as a bomb shelter, of course. So we were in there, and that was really a crazy scene. When we got in there, there was another rocket that fell, I guess, 3 kilometers from us, which is not far, but you see where we saw exactly where it fell and where the smoke was coming from. And it was definitely nerve-wracking. And the scene that we had in the bomb shelter was actually quite interesting. We had, I guess, about 15 families or so who were in the bomb shelters with their kids. Dogs were there. And aside from all those families, it was also Simchat Torah. And being a secular village or secular moshav, we have one religious family that lives in our village, and usually on holidays they bring, I guess, a group of young families or young yeshiva students to have a minyan.
Hmm.
So all of a sudden, all these secular Israelis with their phones trying to get updates and trying to figure out what's going on, are in there, and the kids are playing, and then all of a sudden we have a minyan with with all the religious Israeli families that are in the bomb shelter next to us,
Hmm.
and they're saying Tehillim, reciting psalms,
Hmm.
and praying, and then so that was kind of amidst all the chaos to see kind of the two people, and they were asking us what's going on, because they're not checking their phones.
Yeah.
And then closer to 11, some of the men were asked to come and go up to the Torah in the Beit Knesset, in the synagogue next to the bomb shelter. So some of us got up, we went in, and we were called to
Hmm.
the Torah, and we had some kind of, I don't know if it was a celebration, but we
Right.
were definitely commemorating the finishing of the reading of the Torah. And then we moved back into the bomb shelter, and all of a sudden there's a huge pot of kugel, Jerusalem kugel, if you're familiar with Jerusalem kugel, and cakes and all kinds of things for people to eat. Uh, and it was just this crazy, crazy, weird, surreal scene that I don't think would ever happen otherwise. Already at 11:30, some of the guys who had come to help out with the minyan, were called to reserves duties, and so they on Shabbat and on Simchat Torah were looking for lifts to get out of the moshav and to go and put on their uniforms. Um, and it was just so surreal and so chaotic, because nobody
Yeah.
nobody knew, nobody understood
Yeah.
the scope of what was going on. And it was just all, I'd say, I'll tell you, for 12 days after October 7th, I was living on coffee, just drinking. I didn't have an appetite. No, it was
I can
just
only
chaos.
imagine because you're there, we're here, and many of us are living on coffee, watching all this stuff. Tell me, so you engaged and have been engaging in a fundraising campaign.
Yes,
Tell us about it.
yes. I just want to kind of mention one little detail before that. Um, we also found out later the same day that one of the founding members of our Moshav, who had gone to fight with a unit, a counterterrorism unit called Lotar. Lotar is a reserve unit that will usually, if there's a bunch of villages that are around the same area on a border, they will have a unit that they put together called Lotar, which is the reserve unit of local fighters, and they will be called if necessary. And our group of Lotar fighters went that morning at 7 to go to the junction of Re'im Junction, near the party, near the kibbutzim, and near what was going on. And one of the founding members of our Moshav, and also he's also the manager. He was the manager of our cooperative dairy farm. He was killed in action.
Oh, it's horrible.
Alongside another friend who was killed from the Moshav next to us, Moshav Kmehin. And they left behind 2 beautiful wives and altogether 8 children.
Oh my.
And I always kind of said to people, like I'm Israeli, I live in Israel, but I didn't serve in the army, so that's kind of what I'm missing. And then I discovered on that day that I'm missing that deep scar of living through a war and living through terror attacks that nobody wants to feel, but it's also, I guess, in a sick kind of way on the checklist of being Israeli, unfortunately.
Right.
So that was also the shock of those days, and the days after, we of course had their funerals, military funerals that were done in the cemetery in the Moshav next to us.
Yeah.
So having said that, I'm running a couple of two separate fundraisers. The first one is for our elementary school that was started by members of my Moshav. It is a Montessori kind of spirited elementary school from grades 1 to 8. And they have 25 full-time students, but after the aftermath of October the 7th, they took in either families that had come to our area, they took in some of their kids, and as well as a group of Eritrean refugees that were in Ashkelon were also moved to those facilities. And for the most part, the big idea, the fundraiser for that one is basically the big goal is to revamp security facilities for the school to make the environment safer. So that would be upgrading bomb shelters, exits, anything that would be needed within the framework of security, and making sure that it's not just a good learning environment, but also a safe learning environment.
Right.
So that's one part of it. The other fundraiser that I'm running is for emergency security needs for our Moshav. The security needs in the Moshav, again, we live in a bubble. You mentioned COVID before, when you said you traveled before COVID. So for us, COVID was getting together with friends all the time, kids in daycare, and kind of just living regular life out there in the desert. And we always felt that if anything's going to happen, this is the safest place in Israel. But all of a sudden, we kind of understand that we shouldn't be so lax. It's always, when you get comfortable, it's easy to get comfortable and not think about these things. But we realize that now that we need to have a first response team. So a first response team is made up of 17 members of the Moshav, who basically have been, I guess we can call it, been drafted into the reserves, but they stay and protect our village. They don't go fight on the front lines, these people. And so they're lacking a few different things. The main thing is for surveillance technology, a couple of different things in terms of tactical gear for this response team. So that's the big chunk of it. And the second part of the fundraising for the Moshav itself is to establish a memorial for our dear friend Iftach, founding member and manager of the Moshav, who fell in battle. So that's what I'm up to these days in terms of.
I will share that in the description of this video so people could find out more information about it. So on a final note, how did you came back to Montreal with your family to visit your family, and I found out off air that your stepfather is the best suitcase fixer in the world,
Yeah,
Menachem Mendel, who has done so much for me over the years. What a small world.
yeah.
But there's a program right through Federation that enabled you to come back to Montreal for a visit.
So what had happened? Actually, it was the RCAF who was helping with emergency flights out of Israel, not directly to Canada. And they provided a flight to Athens. We spent a couple of days in Athens, and the tickets were purchased with a discount from Air Canada.
Okay.
But upon arriving in Montreal, we realized that Federation has this. First of all, Federation is amazing. I mean, I grew up with, the posters every year. I was also on a poster of Federation, I think in 2010 or 11,
Yeah,
and my friends
Federation
would tell me, "Oh,
CJA. Mm-hmm.
Federation CJA," and I knew that they were always busy and active, of course, but really to feel it and to feel hugged without even having to, it's not like a representative of the Federation came and gave us big hugs and stuff,
Yeah,
but that they're there, that they're interested, that they want to incorporate not just Montreal, former Montrealers, but
yeah,
Israelis, having programming in Hebrew,
yeah,
making it possible for kids to come and go into Jewish schools free of charge, which is incredible. There were emails that were sent out to people coming from Israel, asking what do you need? Basically, what you need. You filled out a survey. A day after, they called you back and they said, "Okay, you marked off. You need help with immigration. You need help with this," and they'll get you, whether it's to someone in Ometz or there's someone who also who can help you. Um, there's no lack. There's no lack. And I think and I think beyond, of course, Federation, and we're so grateful for that. It's really seeing the people, the Jewish people of Montreal, and also all over the world coming together. Because when we landed here, we got to my mom's house, and the news is on, and we were like, "Oh, I thought we left this behind."
yeah, right.
And it was crazy, but it just doesn't leave you.
Yeah.
It follows us wherever we go, and we're living in a situation where it's very troubling, uh, that people, there are people who are afraid to show their Judaism and to show that they're Jewish, and this is really the time to do exactly the opposite, to show that we're proud of being Jewish, and that we're able to stand up. And I think one of there's, of course, there's the war in Israel, Hamas, and all these terrible things, and the terrible massacre, and the things that we've seen. But I think that there's also something very important that we need to pay attention to, which is what I see as the attempt to define who is a Jew, the attempt to define, what is a Zionist, or who is a Zionist, and all these kind of terms. And I guess, how do you call it? The broadcasting of messages that are basically trying to wipe out the Jewish identity
Yeah,
from the Jewish people.
yeah.
And now is the time to be sure of that identity, and for everyone to realize, what is so beautiful about being Jewish. How is it possible that we get from 4,000 years ago, with Abraham, and through Egypt, and then
Hmm.
through destruction of two temples, and the Hellenization,
Right.
and the Christians coming into the Holy Land, and so on and so on and so on. How do we exist today? And there's something magical about that, and I hope people dig deep to understand that for themselves, and find, it doesn't have to be halakha and Torah, but find that beautiful thing about their Judaism that can inspire us to be strong, and continue on.
Well, Mitch, thanks for sharing your story. Good luck, and we'll stay in touch with you. Mark Paul, thanks for the connection, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Mitch Sohmer has been my guest on the Suburban Video Network.